Hello, everybody, and thanks for joining us today on this dreary Tuesday afternoon. It's getting to that time of year, isn't it, where the weather starts to get worse, and we all start to think about, I guess, performance reviews. So yeah, thank you for joining us, everybody. Really looking forward to being able to talk to you for the next half hour or so on the topic. I'm Andrew Gillespie, so I'm a senior consultant at Lane 4. I'll be hosting the webinar today. I've been around Lane 4 for 5.5 years now. A business psychologist by background, and I spend a lot of time working on this topic, particularly coaching people through role plays and on a one-to-one basis on this kind of thing. So really pleased to be here. And I'll invite Aid to introduce himself.
Yeah, so Adrian, the Managing Director of Lane 4. I picked this one actually because I can. I like the idea of performance conversations and performance reviews because from my old world, I mean, some of you will be aware of Lane 4's heritage in sport. So, you know, the relationship between the performer and the coach is fundamental, and you need to know how you're getting on. And it's not a one-time wonder. It happens during the year. So I'm really interested in the whole performance conversations you can have. And then the review itself, how do you roll that up, and what actually do you review? And then as a Managing Director of Lane 4, of course, and we've got over 200 people now, and it's like, so I'm hopeful that individuals and managers are having conversations about not just the role they have and employed to do, but the goals they have for the year, but even for the week, for the month, you know, let's make it live. That's what I'm really interested in, because if those conversations are happening throughout the organization, throughout teams, then the whole organization performs well.
Yeah, and I guess that's one of the key points, isn't it? That it's not about, although we're at the end of year and everybody will be thinking about end of year reviews, it's a process and a conversation which needs to be going on throughout the year. We'll talk about that in a bit. So what we're here to talk about, I guess, we're going to be talking a little bit about what are some of the common barriers, what are the things that get in the way of effective performance review. I've seen and heard about many, so look forward to sharing a few stories with you there. And then thinking about, well, what does make a really effective performance review, and what are some of the things you can do to make sure that it's consistently good across your organisation. And along the way as well, hopefully Aidan and I will be able to share some tips with you to help you make sure that your end of year reviews are as productive and successful as they can be. And so we'll kind of come back to the beginning for it all, really, about what's the point of a performance review. And it's a really important one for me. I think when I've worked with people on performance reviews, when you see poor performance reviews being done, by and large it relates back to the fact that people have totally lost sight of the actual point of a performance review. So why are they doing it? Why would you? What is the point other than just to make sure that you've got given an accurate measure of someone's reward? Well, why are you doing that? And for me, it comes down to individual motivation. You want to make sure that somebody's motivated and excited about performing well for the next year, and that they felt really good about whatever performance they've been able to deliver this year. And even if it's not been great, then how do you still get them excited and motivated for the next year? So that's what it's all about for me, and from an individual perspective. Aid, what about?
Yes, yeah, from the organisation, I mean, as I said before, speaking as a managing director of an organisation, there's something about, not to come to the second one on that chart, which is the alignment of goals, because you can have aspirations of the organisation achieving something. So we as a company are going this way. We want to do this year, and here's some key sort of things we want to go after. And then that comes down to the organisation, but also it's come up from the organisation, because if you've got a great goal process, then teams and individuals are talking about what they can achieve. The organisation is talking about what it wants to achieve. And that alignment is fundamental. So in setting off, having the goals that drive individuals, teams and the organisation forward are really important. And so a review, and for me again, it is the ongoing review of performance, helps you keep an alignment and give individuals a line of sight to the organisation goals, which I think is really important. And you know, you are contributing well because of, or you could improve your performance because of. There's some sort of ongoing organisational performance that is only affected by individuals.
Right. And so we've got really highly motivated people, or the goal is highly motivated people. I know that's utopia, and people who are aligned and all contributing towards a better performing organisation. But it so frequently goes wrong. And what we want to hear from our audience is, what is it that makes getting the right outcome so difficult? So why does it seem to be so difficult to to get these performance reviews right. So if you can type into the chat box any views you have, we'd love to hear about them. But in the meantime, Age, what's your perspective?
Well, it's interesting because I think that sometimes I think people are afraid. I mean, at the highest level, sometimes people are afraid of the emotion or the conversation they may have, and we can talk about why as we go forward. But I think that often there is a fear, an anxiety about whether there's an alignment with what we set out to do and what we are doing. I think sometimes it exposes, or it can expose, that lack of specificity of goals. I think it can expose the fact that you didn't set off well in a series of things you were asking for. So there's some of those things that I think make the conversation difficult. I think sometimes the fact that people think it's just ticking a box for HR. I've got to do this. It's part of my job, and if I don't do it, and so the outcome is more important than the process itself. Yeah. So actually, that is one of the issues.
And we got a few comments interestingly here. So someone's talked about one of the difficult things is having a difficult conversation with someone to aid their development. So I guess that's one that we will be talking about, I guess. But the emotions run high in these kind of conversations, right? There's a lot at stake for some people.
Well, again, and that's one of the comments that's been made. There's a lot at stake. What is at stake? So the rating, the actual idea that you might rate somebody and it might link to some form of financial reward, means that you might get an individual trying to boost themselves, and then the manager trying to tell them exactly what they think of it. So it makes it quite difficult if there's a veil between the people.
Yeah.
And so I think if you can, it's not hard. It's not easy, to separate the two things out. It really isn't, because there has to be some form of honest appraisal or performance. That's the point.
Yeah.
But as we said, and something I think I also said, that because they only happen infrequently, or the organisation is asking for them infrequently, then that is a real issue. But a great manager that doesn't leave any surprises till the end. There are conversations that happen without the rating. You can mid-year, for instance, you can have a great conversation about how things are going without knowing where it's going to end up. So therefore, am I on track? What am I on track for? And I think that's quite a fundamental one.
Well, it's a funny one, isn't it? When we talked earlier about goals shifting through the year as well, and having the opportunity to revisit them. So the regular revisitation of goals is a really, really important part of it as well. So you might get 6 months through the year, and we're talking about the sort of volatility of the environment we're all working in at the moment. Then needing to make sure that your goals are current and relevant is also a really, really important thing.
No, that's absolutely, because the organisation has goals, and you often set your goals according to what that objective was at the beginning of the year. Goalposts move.
Yes.
But the interesting conversation is whether you as a manager and your team are talking about the context, are talking about relevance. Because what you really, really want is the organisation individuals paying attention and being relevant to the marketplace as the marketplace works. So you back down to what is performance. And when was it set? So if it's set in January and you're performing to that for 12 months, and you've got an issue if the organisation is doing something very different 9 years down the line. So you have to. That's why the regular thing is important.
Great, and so we've got so many different suggestions here. Another really good one, and a really, really valuable point actually, about good handover during management changes being vital. So, and I think I've already talked about this. Some of the work that we do, one of the exercises we set up is exactly that. So people take over from another team who's been set poor goals, or you don't understand the goals, and then how on earth do you manage to manage somebody's performance? So coming in as a manager in those kind of times is particularly tricky, I guess. We've already kind of prepared a number of other examples as well, but we seem to be kind of covering it off in a fair bit of depth already. I guess one of the other things, and again, someone's already mentioned this in the chat box about it being a rating system that affects employees and their rewards. So, and particularly the reporting and reward structure, making it difficult to do that. I agree with that as well. So it makes it, you're juggling multiple priorities in those kind of conversations. And then I go back to this fundamental misunderstanding. So it's really, what am I here to do? Why am I bothering to do this in the first place? What's it really about? And it's not about ticking boxes. It shouldn't be about ticking boxes or following processes or doing it because HR told me to do it, or following even of course, you want to get the rewards right, and you want it to be fair for the next year. But whatever you're doing, you want to set it up as well as you possibly can to make sure that your employee in that context and the broader employees in your business are really motivated to work brilliantly the next year.
Yeah, and that's sort of, I think that tackles one of the big issues is who's it for. You know what I mean? Because ultimately you've got an organisation driver, but the very best when the individual owns it and the individual sees such real richness and opportunity for development and opportunity to move forward. And so it's not something that's feared, it's something that is done with the positive and the right intent. And if you have a great manager who knows how to build good relationships with the team, you're more likely to get closer to that nirvana, which is the intent is for the individual to really get the best development, the best review, the best opportunity. And that should be an ongoing thing.
It's a really good point as well, because I'm thinking about my line manager for this year, and it's strange to say, I'm looking forward. I've got it a week on Monday. No, it's this Monday. It's next Monday.
It's not me, right?
Yeah, it's not with you. It's with my manager. But and then given it's the end of the year, I need to make sure he feels good about himself, so he gives me a good rating. But no, he's really good. And what he really does is, last year we had a real opportunity to reflect on what went well with you. I felt brilliant coming out of my performance review. I was kind of a good foot taller, and so having that time and space to have a properly good conversation just makes all the difference. I guess, so we were going to talk about what does good look like then. So do you want to talk through some of the things that you think?
Well, if I start in the middle, on the reflection and employees owning it, I think is really interesting. I picked up on that a second ago, and I think that if this is the review itself, let's say this is a moment, and it might be that sort of annual moment or the half-yearly moment, which is who's looking for the benefit from that meeting. And if an employee, if you're managing somebody, you want the employee to own it, and that reflection piece is them reflecting coming in. You want them to want to reflect coming into it, so that they can say, look, here's how I want to get something out of it. So it's not about, as you said, me, the manager, telling you something you never knew about yourself, or I'm just going to use this opportunity to lay my feedback on you.
And that's what used to happen to me. I remember an old organisation I worked in where it was literally the chairman would take the opportunity to tell you what was wrong with you, and then you'd walk out and you'd call up the recruiter. That's what happened. That's how I ended up joining where I work now. So, but exactly that happened.
Yeah. So that's that bit about making it a reflective process before and during. And I think that the good ones are where you open up, use questions, you open up. Well, you find something out that neither of you knew, actually, when I get to the better ones. And I think that then you're into the manager knowing how to coach. And if you think about great coaches, some of the fundamental pillars of great coaches, having a great relationship with somebody, really, really knowing the human being, so being authentic and trust that you're on there as well. So that building a great relationship. And we'll come on to that as I actually think that's a skill. And then the other thing is setting good goals, got clear goals there, making sure that you are not just giving KPIs, numerical measures, but you've got some outcome stuff and some process stuff, because often you want to review the process. The process is often the behavior rather than the particular KPI. I think you've got to think about lazy metrics as well.
Yeah. We had good fun trying to articulate this one out. But yeah, there's something for me about just because you've got a metric doesn't mean that it's a good metric. And when you're setting goals, it needs to be the right one, actually. And I do a lot of work on culture with organisations, and so you hear about all sorts of things. One was a particular sort of merchant, I won't tell you who, but a merchant organisation that sold building supplies, basically. And one of the metrics they had initially was as a help in the branches. So it was to measure how often, how frequently phone calls weren't answered, and to help managers out with understanding what was going on in their organisations. And after time, that actually started to get used as a performance metric in these retail outlets or the merchant outlets. And so regional scores were given for all this kind of stuff, and you'd have frontline operatives or people working at the desk, customer service people, who were punished or rewarded based on the fact that they answered the phone or not, and they'd have a queue out the door of different people waiting to pick up their building supplies. And in the meantime, they were, sorry, I can't talk to you, I've got to answer the phone. And they'd be doing that all morning. And it's just a simple example of how the wrong metric can can introduce completely the wrong behaviour. It's actually intended to help, but you really have to think about how are these metrics kind of laid out, and we'll talk a little bit more about how that impacts on managers as well.
And then if you go think about the good review itself, and again the skill of giving and then receiving feedback, because I think there's something about helping somebody be specific about feedback, own it. Trying not to aggregate everybody's stuff and say here's what everybody thinks about you, but really trying to own something you've got some data on. And I think the specificity is really important. Now, receiving feedback is also a skill, and often, people are not sure how to receive it, and I think that sometimes the giver might not be skilled at giving feedback. There's something about accepting the intent of the conversation and then trying to suck out what you hear as a reviewee. So I think that's quite important.
And we've got a question here actually from one of our attendees. He says, how do you make it genuinely objective and not just the opinion of your line manager, which is especially important in large organisations where multiple people are potentially reported on by different managers. Now, it's interesting. I was thinking when I was reading that question, Lane 4's not necessarily, we're not 50,000 people yet anyway, but we do that, right? So we work in the context where we've got lots of different managers and so on. Ed, do you have any particular ideas about how you create that in this context?
What do you mean, different managers working together?
Well, so I rarely ever work with my line manager. As a consultant, I'm out delivering with different client projects and sometimes very autonomously as well. So there is a reporting line, but if you're doing it well, there's quite a loose reporting line, if that makes sense. People are just happy because your client's happy. So how do you make sure?
Well, for me, this is where you get back to the employee owning it. The heart of this thing here is that for you to gather data from those people you've been working with, because you're interested, you want to improve on that client project, you want to improve on something else. So you're almost like gathering your own data. Yeah. So because you see yourself as a performer. So the heart of this is whether, and it's fascinating. I mean, it's 20 odd years ago, 25 years ago, I transferred from my old world into business. But this perception of people as, I know, employee number or widget number 2 or whatever, but actually you're a human being and you're a performer. You're somebody who has value and you are valuable. You're a talented person, whatever you do.
It's very kind of you to say so.
But I think if you see that, then you go, actually, me doing a great job, which has, it's an age-old thing. We all know people come to work to do a decent job, and they want to do this job. They don't come to work to do a crap job. But the point is that if you see yourself as that person, then if the culture, and we'll come to culture in a second, is okay, you're more likely to not be defensive. You're more likely to be somebody who creates opportunity and explores how you perform. So for me, there's something not just about putting this responsibility on the manager. So you've all got to be great at reviews. There's actually something about enabling the employees to be seekers, to be performers, and to see themselves and to gather as much information as you can.
It makes that ownership part so important, doesn't it? Like giving people the ownership for their own performance. And going back to, comes back to the coaching point, which is about a great coach will not take ownership of other people's performance. They allow the person to do that. And as a coach, you facilitate that or help to kind of drive that forward.
And I think if you then go on to the responsibility of the organisation, then there's all sorts of things here. There's that, you talked about lazy metrics earlier, making sure the organisation's got the measures that will drive the behaviours they want to drive, making sure that they have set, it's a bottom one here, but a culture where you feel okay being that person that's gathering information. You've got the organisation doesn't have a series of forms to fill in, tick box exercise where it stifles that. Because imagine you say, look, I run your team, and I say, look, I really want this culture of the performer seeking information, gathering the data. We have a great conversation. We get in there. Then I have this 20-page document. Okay, so question 1, and then we get bored by question 3.
I've got a really good example to share with you on that one, because this is an organisation I work with. It's an insurance company, right? So you can bet the thing they love the most in the world is process and the kind of people that work there. They are set up to follow a lot of processes because they have to, and so often that's the comfort zone for people. They really revert back into the process, and particularly when they feel uncomfortable with the uncomfortableness of some of the things you're going to be talking about sometimes, or if they're not confident in those kind of conversations, what happens is that they feel sort of psychologically rescued by the fact that there's a process you can fall back on. But what that ends up with being is both people involved in the conversation are looking at a piece of paper, and they're writing down stuff, and eventually, sooner or later, the sort of direct report in the role play will check out of the conversation. They're bored, and they don't feel inspired or motivated anymore. It's a manager-led task management process, and they leave the conversation feeling done to, basically, which is probably about as bad as it could be, beyond just someone telling you what's terrible about you.
Yeah, no, I mean, and then you're into this top point, which is supporting employers to understand what good looks like. So if you think that great coaching is at the heart of a great review, or great performance reviews, because throughout the year it is in your identity as a leader or manager to be a great coach, then understanding some of the skills related to good goal setting, the skills related to giving feedback and receiving feedback. I think relationship building as well, because I think, I think we both have an introversion preference.
Yeah,
which is...
It's why we're cooped up in a windowless room right now.
So I think that's quite interesting, because, going into this meeting and actually, or during the year, building a good relationship so you really truly understand the people that work for us, you have to work on that. You have to sort of get out of your box and make sure that you let them and you discover and you understand what really truly switches people on, because you're trying to hook into that.
Yeah. We've had another really great question here, $1 million question, this one. It's any tips for calibration? There will always be those that overrate and those that underrate themselves. How can managers ensure the process is fair?
You're the Oxfag.
Thank you. Goodness. So I guess there's a big part of it which is about the gathering of feedback from other people. So as you would with, if you're really asking for a sort of Oxpsyche opinion on it, having multiple sources of information to be able to provide a conclusion for anything is important. So if you're just asking for data from your team member for them to rate their performance, of course you're going to get biased information. It takes exceptional levels of self-awareness and a total lack of self-interest, to be completely honest, in a performance review. So having information that come from different points, whether that's metrics, whether it's other people's views on this person's performance, are important. And one of the things that's really great practice at Lane 4 is it's a sort of just thing everybody does and nobody questions it, which I think is a good thing, by the way. But we all send out emails at the end of the year and say, give us some feedback. I should do it more often, actually, through the year as well, reflecting on it in this conversation. But we send out emails and say, can you provide me with some feedback on my performance? What have I done well? What could I do better? If it's down to me, I could just skim the good stuff and stick that in my performance review documentation. But really, the manager should be part of that conversation at the same time. And I would expect a manager to be looking for those kind of perspectives. But I think always better if that's owned by the team member than it's again done to by the manager. So there's a bit of that perspective. I think then when it gets chunked up into calibration between managers, interestingly enough, some of the skills we've already talked about are really important. So certainly being able to focus on behaviours and evidence as we're talking about it, rather than that kind of gut feel or whether you like somebody or whether they feel like a good cultural fit. There's currency and things like that. But really what it's about is what are the behaviours that you're seeing and what are people showing up with in the context they're in.
I think, can I just build on that? Because I think about, because a lot of this rolls up to me, actually, if I think about the board, I mean, being really open. So, we will get different managers or different people who lead teams who have different ways. Some people might be more optimistic and some people more pessimistic and say, actually, my whole team did great, or my whole team, really hard. Somebody's really hard on their team. I think that calibration is fundamentally important, and then you're into how well does that team know each other. Yes. So actually, if you take it into any level of organisation, you do need a series of managers at a certain level being able to have a really good conversation about calibration. I think. Yeah. How are you? Are you a hard marker? Are you hard on people? Are you softer on people? And actually leveling that out, I think, is not easy to do, but it requires great relationships, and you're in it for the company rather than in it for something individual.
You keep saying everything I'm about to say, so but these are great. I was going to say the relationships is a huge part of it, and so if I'm sitting down calibrating the leader, I need to feel comfortable challenging him and know that he's not going to get upset because he really values his team and I don't understand the contribution they've had. It's got to be a really good, disciplined conversation. So
the only other thing that's just jumped out to me on this particular chart is the rewarding the coaching part of leadership, and just going back to that piece. I think that seeing that as a very valuable thing, that, you don't just get rewarded or promoted because you're good at achieving some specific obvious KPIs, but actually you don't just reward, you actually notice, reward, call out, and value coaching as a promotable, whatever, as a skill that's really valued. Because you'll often find it that a great leader who does this really well, their team's often performing very well.
Yeah.
And so can you make sure you call it out? And I think sometimes in HR, or the organisations that put systems in, we need to really drive hard in that rewarding and coaching part.
Again, it's the easy metrics, right? So measuring the ability or the quality of somebody's coaching is not always the easiest thing in the world to do, but I guess there are ways of doing it though, and being able to. So just because it's very difficult to put a quantitative metric against somebody's ability to coach. You can do 360s and things like that, but even they're subjective, all sorts of subjective bias, right? But there's something about making sense of what's going on in that context, and even calling out and just praising the right stuff, or giving feedback when it's, giving developmental feedback when it's not being done right.
I think, again, before we sort of close to finishing up, that's sort of how do you create a culture that enables open conversations? And ultimately, this is the one that goes back to the very heart of this, which is having an organisation where it's just the way you do stuff day in, day out, week in, week out. If you run a project team, you're in another team, you're likely to be able to have a good open conversation, which isn't stilted, it's not a surprise. You are doing it all the time because you care about people that work for you, that come to work and want to do a good job, and you want to help them do a good job. So therefore, this thing is dynamic. It happens all the time.
And there's a question I have for you then is how do you do that for yourself? Being managing director, you don't have somebody who manages your performance necessarily. So what? No,
it's interesting because we did talk about it. I thought, well, actually, I don't have a one-to-one. I thought, I wonder if I have had a review in that. But I do, apart from having a coach, I do sit down with the board at the beginning of the year and we look at the organisation goals, look at each team, we share the goals of each department. But then we also look at 4 or 5 goals for me. So what can only I do, and what is the team looking for from me? And what can I deliver? And it's quite interesting actually, because then I do hear from the rest of my team about what they need from me, not just behaviourally, but actually achievement. And then at the end of the year, we do the review thing, and I will sit and I'll get it in the round. I think that's pretty healthy, but it does need those strong relationships where you do trust the intent, and nobody's giving you that for the first time. Yeah. So, but it's I don't get a review by an individual, but I do get the board review me actually.
I'll ask you offline when's the last time you got a red rating then. But well, I guess it's a really great point to make, though. It comes back to the people side of what you're doing, and that's what I spend so much time on a one-to-one basis doing, is helping people to think about how do you work with a person, not a job or a task or a series of tasks or things or a process. It's about how is this person performing in the context, and how do they feel about that performance in the context is what it all comes down to. So we're coming down to the last couple of minutes. We've probably got time for a question or two if anybody has any. So please type your questions in the box and let us know if you've got anything you're still curious about. In the meantime, Ada, any questions for me?
Yeah, I guess you work with a number of our clients setting this up, and you mentioned a couple of clients, organisation we're working with. So, what is a skill? What is a mindset? How do you develop this for people to, get enough information? I mean, for me, it's the live nature of it.
Yeah, well, this is what I was saying before. Is I don't think there's a better way of doing this other than it's sort of playing out in reality. It's a very practical skill, and when you're having conversations with other people, you're not always aware of the things that you do in those contexts. What do you say that can diminish somebody else's feelings about themselves, or what can you say that actually allows them to be a bit sloppy-shouldered and not take responsibility for something? Lots of managers love to help, so they take responsibility away from people, but that gives license to shirk things and not take ownership to a team member. So how do you catch people in the act of doing that? And it all is down to, for me, it's all about live observation. You can do that in role plays, or even I think you could tape a video bits of what you're doing live, if that makes sense, and review it with a colleague or peer afterwards.
And just one question I'd like to jump on here. So what skills do you need to develop in managers? I think that's quite an important one, specific skills that you develop. And I think that the ability to be authentic, to talk about what's important to you. I think there's something about role and goal clarity. I think something about checking in that the role that you've employed somebody to do is the one they're still doing, and so noticing that throughout the year. But also the goals, and are they fit for purpose? Are they the right context? So I think that setting and understanding really good goals is really important, because often we can be lazy with a KPI or a goal that we can just filter down to somebody. But if you flip it the other way around, you're really trying to help a manager give somebody a line of sight to what the team's trying to achieve and what the organisation's trying to achieve, because then you're linking motivation of the individual to the performance needs of the organisation, and that's where it gets really powerful.
Right. Well, listen, it's just ticked over, gone 5:30 now, so we're going to have to wrap up. Anybody who's put any questions in, we will get back to you, so we'll send an email. We'll probably circulate that in the round as well to everybody and share our responses to all of you. But thanks to everybody for attending. Really appreciate you being able to join. And if you've enjoyed what you've heard about today, please do share it on the usual social media outlets and continue the conversation there. So thanks everybody, and we'll look forward to catching up with you on our next webinar.
Yeah, thank you very much.